Dr. Anna Brooks was a name well known in the scientific community, a renowned neurobiologist whose groundbreaking work on neural-controlled prosthetics had the potential to revolutionize the world of medicine. Her life was one of constant motion, juggling research, public appearances, and raising her 12-year-old son, Trevor. Trevor was no ordinary boy. A prodigy in his own right, he shared his mother's passion for science and technology. Despite his young age, he had already created several inventions that impressed even the most seasoned engineers. Together, they were more than just a family, they were a team, united by their shared curiosity and drive to solve complex problems. Their bond was unshakable, forged through long nights of experiments, setbacks, and triumphs. On this particular evening, Anna and Trevor found themselves heading to a local park. It wasn't just an ordinary outing. Trevor had been working tirelessly on a new drone prototype, equipped with advanced recognition and response capabilities. The drone, which could identify and react to potential threats, was part of a larger project linked to Anna's research on neural interfaces. Trevor had programmed the drone to autonomously respond to environmental cues, making it both a tool for exploration and an exercise in artificial intelligence. Anna had encouraged this project, believing that hands-on experience was the best way for Trevor to learn and grow. Tonight was the culmination of months of work, a final test in a real-world setting. The park was a sprawling expanse of greenery, dotted with families enjoying the mild weather and children playing on the swings. It was the kind of place where one could momentarily forget about the chaos of the outside world. As they arrived, Anna glanced at her son, who was clutching his tablet with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Ready to show the world what you've built?" she asked with a warm smile. Trevor nodded, his determination clear despite the flicker of doubt in his eyes. "I hope it works as we planned, Mom," he replied. Anna placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Even if it doesn't, we'll figure it out together. That's what we always do." Unbeknownst to them, Officer Tom Raines was patrolling the same park. Tom was a man under pressure, known within the department for his aggressive tactics and questionable behavior. He had recently been placed under investigation for excessive use of force. He was determined to prove himself as a competent officer, though his methods often betrayed his deep-seated prejudices. To Tom, the world was divided into those who followed his sense of order and those who didn't belong. His patrols were less about maintaining peace and more about asserting his authority. Tonight he was in a foul mood, frustrated by what he saw as a lack of respect for his position and the mounting scrutiny from his superiors. As Tom drove his patrol car slowly through the park's parking lot, his attention was drawn to Anna and Trevor. From his vantage point, he saw a black woman unloading what appeared to be complex equipment from her car while a young boy fiddled with a device that looked suspiciously high-tech. His mind immediately jumped to conclusions. To him, they didn't look like they belonged in this quiet suburban park. The expensive-looking drone and Trevor's tablet only heightened his suspicion. "What's all this high-tech gear doing here?" he muttered to himself. Probably up to no good. Without waiting for any real justification, Tom decided to approach them. Anna, oblivious to Tom's presence, was helping Trevor set up the drone. She adjusted the small rotors and double-checked the stability of the camera mounted on the device. Trevor was deeply engrossed in his tablet, calibrating the drone's sensors and running final diagnostics. The two of them worked seamlessly, their movements synchronized in a way that spoke of years of shared effort. For Anna, this was more than just a test run. It was a moment to bond with her son, to show him that his ideas mattered and that they could achieve great things together. She took a deep breath, savoring the serenity of the evening, unaware that it was about to be shattered. Tom parked his patrol car a short distance away and stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel. He adjusted his belt where his taser and firearm hung prominently and strode toward Anna and Trevor with an air of authority. His eyes were fixed on the drone, his mind racing with baseless assumptions. As he approached, he called out in a tone that was both loud and confrontational, "Hey, what's going on here?" Startled, Anna turned to face him, her calm demeanor masking the irritation that bubbled beneath the surface. She had dealt with people like Tom before, men who mistook confidence for defiance and viewed her intelligence as a threat. "We're just testing a drone," Anna replied evenly, her voice polite but firm. Trevor looked up from his tablet, instinctively stepping closer to his mother. Tom narrowed his eyes, scanning the scene with an expression that betrayed his mistrust. "That's some fancy equipment for a test," he said, his tone dripping with skepticism. "What are you really doing here?" Anna sighed inwardly, recognizing the situation for what it was. She had seen this play out too many times before. "My son is working on a school project," she explained. "I'm supervising." "Is there a problem, officer?" Tom crossed his arms, his stance becoming more confrontational. "A problem? Yeah, I'd say there's a problem. You're in a public park with equipment that looks like it could interfere with public safety. Do you have any permits for this?" Anna's patience began to wear thin. "We don't need permits to fly a drone in an open park," she said, maintaining her composure. Trevor, sensing the tension, lowered his tablet slightly, his fingers hovering over the controls. He didn't like the way the officer was looking at his mom, like she was doing something wrong when she wasn't. Tom took a step closer, his hand resting on the handle of his taser. "Look, lady, I don't know who you think you are, but I'm in charge here. I need to make sure you're not up to anything illegal." Anna straightened her posture, her eyes locking onto his. "Officer, with all due respect, we're not breaking any laws. My son and I have every right to be here." Her tone was calm, but there was an undeniable edge to her words, a quiet strength that made Tom bristle. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he had already deemed suspicious. The tension in the air was palpable as the confrontation escalated. Trevor's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his focus on his tablet. He knew his mum could handle herself, but he also knew that things could spiral out of control quickly. As Tom's hand tightened on his taser, Trevor's mind raced. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he was determined to be ready. Officer Tom Raines tightened his grip on his taser as he stared at Anna and Trevor, his mind racing with baseless justifications for his escalating aggression. For Tom, it wasn't just about the drone or the park, it was about control. He had already decided that Anna's calm defiance was a challenge to his authority, and that was something he couldn't tolerate. Trevor, standing close to his mother, kept his hands on his tablet, his face a mixture of confusion and unease. Anna remained composed, her voice steady as she tried to de-escalate the situation. "Officer, I've explained why we're here. This is my son's school project. If you'd like more information, I can show you the specifications of the drone and its harmless functionality," Anna said, gesturing calmly toward Trevor's tablet. But her measured tone seemed to only irritate Tom further. He took another step closer, his boots crunching loudly on the gravel, his presence now looming uncomfortably close. "Lady, I don't care about your explanations," Tom said sharply, his eyes narrowing. "This thing," he pointed at the drone, which was now hovering a few feet off the ground as Trevor tested its stability, "looks like it could interfere with radio signals or worse. You think I'm just going to take your word for it? For all I know, you're running some kind of surveillance operation or worse. Don't think you can fool me with your fancy words." Trevor, despite his fear, couldn't hold back. "It's not surveillance, sir," he said, his voice small but steady. It's programmed to detect obstacles and identify hazards for rescue missions. It's just a prototype. It can't do anything harmful. His explanation was earnest, but it only fueled Tom's anger. The officer turned his gaze to Trevor, his expression hardening. "Oh, so now the kid's talking back to me, huh?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe you should teach your son some respect, Mom." Anna bristled at the condescending tone but kept her composure. "My son is being respectful, officer. He's explaining the truth about his project, which, again, is completely legal and harmless. I would appreciate it if you didn't intimidate him." Tom's jaw clenched. He was used to people backing down when he raised his voice, but Anna's calm defiance was throwing him off balance. She wasn't scared, and that infuriated him. He looked back at the drone, which was now hovering steadily, its small rotors humming softly. To him, it symbolized everything he despised, things he didn't understand, people he couldn't control. "Turn it off," Tom barked suddenly, his hand now fully gripping his taser. Trevor hesitated, glancing at his mother for guidance. Anna nodded subtly, and Trevor reached down to his tablet, entering a command to bring the drone back to its resting position on the ground. As the drone landed softly, Trevor stepped back, holding the tablet to his chest like a shield. "There," Anna said firmly, her tone unyielding but not aggressive. "It's off. Now, can we please go about our evening without further interruptions?" But Tom wasn't ready to let it go. He was too far into his fabricated narrative of suspicion, too consumed by his need to assert dominance. "Not so fast," he snapped, stepping even closer to Anna. "I'm going to need to take a look at that device," he said, pointing to Trevor's tablet. "And the drone, too. Who knows what kind of illegal software you've got running on these things?" Anna's expression hardened. "Officer, you have no right to confiscate or search our property without probable cause. This is a public park, and we've done nothing wrong." Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now, a quiet warning that she wouldn't tolerate further harassment. Tom smirked, the kind of smirk that betrayed his belief that he could do whatever he wanted and face no consequences. "Probable cause. Lady, your fancy talk doesn't mean a thing to me. If I say it's suspicious, that's all the cause I need." He reached out as if to grab Trevor's tablet, but Anna stepped in front of her son, her eyes blazing with quiet fury. "You will not touch my son's property," she said, her voice low and steady but filled with unmistakable authority. For a moment, Tom hesitated, taken aback by the sheer force of her presence. But his ego wouldn't allow him to back down. He took another step closer, his hand hovering near his taser again. "Are you refusing to comply with an officer's orders?" he said, his voice rising. The loudness of his tone drew the attention of a few people nearby, who began to glance over curiously. Anna didn't flinch. "I am refusing to comply with an unlawful order," she replied firmly. "You have no grounds to search or seize anything here. If you continue this behavior, I will have no choice but to report you for misconduct." Tom's face flushed with anger. In his mind, Anna's words weren't just defiance, they were a direct attack on his authority. He glanced around and noticed the bystanders who were now openly watching the confrontation. This only fueled his frustration. He needed to regain control, to reassert his dominance, and he decided to do so in the most aggressive way possible. Without warning, Tom reached down and grabbed the drone. Trevor gasped, and Anna's hand instinctively shot out to stop him. But Tom was too quick. He held the drone in his hands, inspecting it with exaggerated scrutiny. "What's this? Huh?" he said, shaking the drone slightly. "A weapon? A spying device? You think you can bring this into a public park and nobody's going to ask questions?" "Put it down," Anna said sharply, her composure finally cracking. "You're going to damage it, and you have no idea how delicate that equipment is. It's part of my son's project, and it's not yours to handle." But Tom ignored her, his hands fumbling with the drone's mechanisms. Trevor's eyes welled with tears of frustration and fear, but he managed to speak up. "Please don't break it. It took me months to build. It's not dangerous, it's just a school project." His voice trembled, but his words were clear. Tom looked down at Trevor, his face a mask of contempt. "Oh, I'm sure it's a real innocent project," he said mockingly. "Let's see what it's really made of." He pulled at one of the drone's panels, and there was a sharp snapping sound as part of the casing came loose. Trevor let out a small cry, and Anna took a step forward, her fists clenched at her sides. "That's enough," she said, her voice ringing out with a force that made even Tom hesitate for a split second. "You've crossed the line, officer. Put the drone down now." Tom sneered but set the drone down roughly on the ground, the damage already done. He straightened up, his hand once again moving to his taser. "You're lucky I'm not taking this thing in as evidence," he said coldly. "But I'm still not done here. You're going to show me what's on that tablet, or I'll have no choice but to detain you for obstruction." Anna's heart was pounding, but she refused to show any fear. "You have no grounds to detain me," she said evenly. "And if you think I'm going to let you intimidate my son into giving up his work, you're sorely mistaken." The tension reached a boiling point as Tom took another threatening step forward. Trevor clutched his tablet tightly, his mind racing for a solution. He glanced at the drone, broken but still functional, and an idea began to form. If Tom wouldn't listen to reason, maybe it was time to let the drone speak for itself. Tom Raines's frustration had reached a breaking point. His anger burned as Anna stood her ground, refusing to be cowed by his intimidation. Trevor's wide eyes darted between his mother and the officer, his small hands clutching the tablet, his knuckles turned white. Anna's unwavering stance infuriated Tom. He felt his authority slipping through his fingers, and his bruised ego demanded retaliation. He had spent his career enforcing his version of order, and he wasn't about to let a confident woman and her tech-savvy son undermine that. "All right," Tom said sharply, his voice low and cold. "You want to play this the hard way? Fine." He reached for his taser with deliberate menace, his gaze locked on Anna. "Step back, lady. Don't make me use this." His words, dripping with manufactured authority, sent a chill down Trevor's spine, but Anna didn't move. Her breathing was steady, her eyes burning with a quiet fury. She could see exactly what Tom was doing, but she also knew that any sudden move could escalate the situation further. She raised her hands slightly, her voice calm yet commanding. "Officer, I'm asking you one last time to think about what you're doing. You have no justification to escalate this any further. My son and I have done nothing wrong. If you continue to harass us, you will be the one violating the law." Tom scoffed, his fingers tightening around the handle of the taser. "Violating the law? Lady, you've got some nerve throwing that at me when you're the one acting suspicious." "Now," I said, "step back." Trevor's breath hitched as he saw Tom's thumb hover over the taser's activation button. He knew what was about to happen, and his mind raced for a way to protect his mum. He glanced at the damaged drone on the ground, its exposed wiring sparking faintly from where Tom had ripped off the panel. An idea began to form, a risky one, but it might be the only way to buy them some time. His tablet was still connected to the drone's system, and though the device was damaged, he could activate its emergency response mode. Anna's voice cut through Trevor's racing thoughts. "If you fire that taser, you'll regret it. My son is watching, and there are people around. You can't just assault someone because they won't let you trample their rights." Tom snarled, his patience gone. "Oh, you think you're in control here? Let me show you who's in charge." Without another word, he fired the taser. The electric prong shot forward, striking Anna in the chest. The sudden jolt sent her collapsing to the ground, her body convulsing as the electricity coursed through her. A strangled cry escaped her lips, and Trevor screamed, dropping his tablet in horror. "Mom." Trevor's voice cracked as he fell to his knees beside her. His hands trembled as he tried to shake her awake, but her body was still twitching from the residual shock. Tears streamed down his face as he looked up at Tom, who stood above them with the taser still in his hand, a smug expression on his face. "She'll be fine," Tom said dismissively, holstering the taser. "Maybe next time she'll learn to cooperate." Trevor's fear turned into something else, anger. He wasn't just angry at Tom for hurting his mom, he was furious at himself for not being able to stop it. His mind snapped back to the tablet, lying a few feet away where he had dropped it. The drone was damaged, but it wasn't completely offline. He had designed it to function in emergency scenarios, even when its primary systems were compromised. Trevor wiped his tears and crawled toward the tablet, his small hands fumbling to pick it up. His heart pounded as he opened the control interface, his fingers moving instinctively across the screen. Tom noticed Trevor's movement and turned sharply. "Hey, kid, what do you think you're doing?" He took a step toward Trevor, but the boy had already pressed a command. The drone, still lying on the ground, whirred to life. Its exposed rotors spun erratically at first, but then stabilized. A low hum filled the air as the drone began to hover once again, this time higher than before. Its lights blinked rapidly, and a faint alarm tone emanated from its speakers. "What the hell is that?" Tom demanded, his eyes narrowing as he watched the drone ascend. Trevor didn't answer. His focus was entirely on the tablet, where he activated the drone's defensive protocols. The device had been programmed to emit a high-frequency signal designed to disorient anyone within a close radius, a feature intended for search and rescue missions in hostile environments. Now, it would serve a different purpose. The drone let out a sharp, piercing sound that made Tom stagger backward, clutching his ears. "Turn that damn thing off," he yelled, his voice barely audible over the screeching tone. Trevor didn't hesitate. With another swipe on the tablet, he directed the drone to move toward Tom, its blinking lights casting an eerie glow in the dimming evening. Tom stumbled, his hand reaching for his firearm, but the drone swooped lower, its rotors whirring menacingly. It hovered inches from his face, forcing him to retreat. "You little punk," he shouted, his voice a mix of anger and fear. "You think this is funny? I'll have you both arrested." Trevor didn't respond. He was already activating the drone's next feature. Though its primary camera was damaged, the drone's motion sensors were still operational. It could track Tom's movements and stay just out of reach, keeping him occupied while Trevor tended to his mum. The drone zipped around Tom in quick, unpredictable bursts, causing the officer to flail helplessly as he tried to swat it away. Anna began to stir, her body weak but her mind regaining clarity. She opened her eyes to see Trevor crouched over her, his tablet glowing in his hands. "Trevor," she whispered, her voice hoarse. What are you doing?" "I'm protecting us, Mum," Trevor said without looking up. His voice was steady now, the fear replaced by determination. "Just stay still. I've got this." Tom's rage boiled over as he realized he was being outmaneuvered by a 12-year-old. He lunged forward, his hand reaching for the tablet, but the drone darted in front of him, blocking his path. Its lights flashed brighter, and the high-pitched tone grew louder, making Tom wince in pain. "You think you're smart, huh? I'll..." Before he could finish, the drone emitted a burst of compressed air from one of its auxiliary ports, designed to clear debris in emergency situations. The force caught Tom off guard, knocking him off balance. He stumbled backward, tripping over a park bench and landing hard on the ground. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and for a moment he lay there, gasping. Trevor seized the opportunity to deactivate the drone's alarm, silencing the piercing sound. The sudden quiet was almost deafening. He turned his attention back to Anna, who was trying to sit up. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling again. Anna nodded weakly, her hand reaching for his. "I'll be fine," she said, her voice stronger now. "You did good, Trevor. You kept us safe." Tom groaned as he pushed himself up, his face red with humiliation and fury. "This isn't over," he growled, reaching for his radio to call for backup. But Trevor wasn't done yet. He tapped another command on his tablet, and the drone zipped forward, snatching the radio from Tom's hand with one of its mechanical grips. It flew high into the air, out of Tom's reach, and dropped the radio into a nearby fountain with a splash. Tom stared in disbelief, his hands shaking as he looked from the drone to the boy controlling it. "You're gonna regret this," he spat, his voice trembling. "Both of you." Anna, now on her feet with Trevor's help, stepped forward. Her voice was calm but laced with steel. "No, officer," she said. "You're the one who's going to regret this." Trevor stood beside her, his tablet still in hand, the drone hovering protectively above them. Together they faced Tom, their fear replaced by a quiet, unshakable resolve. The atmosphere in the park was electric with tension. Officer Tom Raines stood frozen for a moment, his face a mixture of humiliation and fury as the drone hovered just above him, its rotors humming softly. Anna, still steadying herself after the taser attack, stood upright with Trevor's help. The boy clutched his tablet tightly, his fingers poised over the controls, ready to act if Tom made another aggressive move. The officer's breathing was heavy, his jaw clenched as he stared them down. His hand hovered near his firearm, but the memory of the drone's swift and calculated moves made him hesitate. For the first time, Tom realized he might be outmatched not by brute force, but by intelligence and ingenuity, something he wasn't used to facing. "Enough games," Tom spat, his voice shaking with rage. "You think this little gadget of yours is going to protect you? You're just digging yourselves into a deeper hole. Backup is on the way. And when they get here, this stunt is going to cost you everything." Anna stepped forward, her legs unsteady but her voice firm. "Backup? You mean more officers like you? Officers who think they can harass a mother and her child in a public park without consequence? Bring them. Let them see exactly how you've conducted yourself tonight." Tom's eyes narrowed, his fingers twitching as if debating whether to escalate further. "I'd try to play the victim here," he growled. "You assaulted an officer. That's what they'll see. And your son. He's tampering with public safety equipment, obstructing justice." "Public safety equipment," Anna interrupted, her tone cutting through his words like a blade. "You mean the drone my son built for school? The one you just tried to destroy? Or the taser you fired at an unarmed woman with no provocation? What you're doing, Officer Raines, is not justice. It's a gross abuse of power." Tom flinched, his eyes darting to the few scattered bystanders who had stopped to watch the confrontation from a safe distance. Though no one dared to intervene, their presence gnawed at him. The shame of being challenged so publicly, especially by someone he already saw as beneath him, only fueled his anger. He couldn't let this end without reasserting control, without proving that he was still the one in charge. Yet, every move he made seemed to backfire. The damn drone, the defiance of the boy, and the unshakable confidence of the woman, it was all spiraling beyond his grasp. Trevor glanced nervously at his mum, then back at the tablet. He whispered, "What do we do, Mom?" "He's not going to stop." Anna placed a reassuring hand on her son's shoulder, her gaze never leaving Tom. "We hold our ground," she said softly. "We don't let him intimidate us." Tom sneered, mistaking Anna's calm resolve for arrogance. "Hold your ground?" he mocked. "Lady, you don't seem to understand what's happening here. You're both in serious trouble. And when my backup arrives, that little toy of yours isn't going to save you." Trevor's grip on the tablet tightened, his heart pounding in his chest. He glanced at the drone hovering above them and quietly activated another feature he had built into its software, a localized signal disruptor. It wasn't powerful enough to interfere with cell towers or emergency communications, but it could temporarily disable radio signals within a small radius. As the disruptor hummed to life, Tom's hand instinctively went to his belt, where his radio was clipped. He frowned, pulling it free and pressing the button. "Dispatch, this is Officer Rains. I need immediate backup." At his words cut off as static crackled through the radio. He pressed the button again, frustration mounting. "Dispatch, come in." The only response was more static. Tom shook the device angrily, his face darkening as he realized it wasn't working. "What the hell did you do?" he barked, his eyes locking onto Trevor. Trevor hesitated, his mouth opening as if to explain, but Anna stepped in front of him, shielding her son with her body. "He didn't do anything illegal," she said firmly. "And even if he did, let's not forget you've already crossed every line tonight. What are you going to do now, officer? Call for help you can't reach. Or maybe you'll finally stop and think about the mess you've made." Tom's hand moved to his firearm, his fingers brushing the grip, but he hesitated. The drone was still hovering, its lights blinking ominously. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching him, calculating his every move. It was just a machine, he told himself, but the thought did little to calm his nerves. He was used to being the one in control, the one who dictated the terms of every encounter. Yet here he was, standing in a park, outmaneuvered by a kid and his high-tech toy. "You think you're so smart," Tom muttered, more to himself than to them. His voice was low, almost a growl. "You think you can just defy the law and get away with it. But I'll tell you something. The law is on my side, not yours. And I will bring you both in if it's the last thing I do." Anna took another step forward, her body aching from the taser's effects, but her resolve unshaken. "The law. You don't represent the law, officer. The law is about justice, fairness, protecting people, not bullying them because you think you can get away with it." Tom opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the drone emitted a sharp beeping sound. Its motion sensors had detected movement in the distance. Trevor glanced down at the tablet and saw a warning message flash across the screen, multiple unidentified entities approaching. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be more officers? Or something else entirely? Tom noticed the change in Trevor's expression and smirked. "Looks like your little toy's glitching, kid," he sneered. "Not so smart now, are you?" Trevor ignored him, his focus entirely on the tablet. He tapped a few commands, redirecting the drone's attention toward the movement it had detected. Its camera swiveled, and its lights illuminated the edge of the park, where shadows began to emerge. For a moment, no one spoke, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The first figure stepped into the light, a park ranger, holding a flashlight and wearing a perplexed expression. Behind him were a few other park visitors who had been drawn by the commotion. The ranger's brow furrowed as he took in the scene, the damaged drone, the boy with the tablet, the woman with obvious signs of having been tased, and the officer standing with his hand on his weapon. "What's going on here?" the ranger asked, his voice calm but firm. His question hung in the air, unanswered as everyone froze, unsure of how to respond. Tom, sensing an opportunity to regain control, straightened up and pointed at Anna and Trevor. "These two are interfering with police work and resisting arrest," he said quickly, his tone authoritative. "I need you to help me detain them." Anna's eyes narrowed. "That's not true," she said, her voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. "This officer assaulted me without cause and has been harassing us ever since." The ranger's gaze shifted between them, his expression skeptical. "Assaulted you?" he asked. "Do you have proof of that?" Trevor raised the tablet slightly. "The drone recorded everything," he said, his voice trembling but clear. "It has motion sensors and audio logs. If you want proof, it's all here." Tom's face turned crimson, his confidence faltering for the first time. He hadn't considered the possibility that the drone might have captured his actions. "Don't listen to them," he snapped. "That thing's probably rigged with all kinds of fake data. You can't trust it." The ranger frowned, his skepticism growing. "I'm not sure what's going on here, but it's clear this situation is out of control. Let's all take a step back and..." Before he could finish, Tom lunged forward, his hand reaching for the tablet in Trevor's hands. Anna moved instinctively, pushing her son behind her and blocking Tom's path. The drone, responding to the sudden aggression, emitted another piercing alarm and swooped lower, positioning itself between Tom and its creators. Tom froze, his hand inches from Anna. The drone's lights flared, casting an eerie glow across his face. For a moment, the park was silent except for the steady hum of the rotors. Then, in a voice that was both quiet and deadly serious, Anna said, "This ends now, Officer Rains. Step back before you do something you can't take back." Tom's chest heaved, his frustration boiling over, but the sight of the ranger and the growing crowd of onlookers stopped him. With a snarl, he stepped back, his hands clenched into fists. "This isn't over," he muttered, his voice low and venomous. Anna turned to Trevor, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He nodded, though his hand still trembled. "I'm fine, Mum, but what about you?" She gave him a small, reassuring smile. "I'll be okay. You did amazing, Trevor. You stood your ground, and you protected us." As the ranger stepped forward, trying to make sense of the situation, Anna felt a surge of pride in her son. Whatever came next, she knew they had already won the most important battle, the battle to stay strong, united, and unyielding in the face of injustice. Tom Raines's humiliation had turned into a full-blown vendetta. His authority had been publicly challenged, not just by Anna, but by a 12-year-old boy with a drone that seemed to be mocking his every move. The park ranger's presence and the murmuring onlookers only made the sting worse. He wasn't just angry anymore, he was desperate. Desperate to reclaim control of the situation and prove, if only to himself, that he was still in charge. His hands shook as he clenched his fists, his knuckles white with tension. The drone hovered ominously a few feet away, its rotors spinning steadily, as if it were waiting for him to make his next mistake. The ranger, standing cautiously between the two parties, was trying to assess the situation, but Tom wasn't interested in being assessed. He needed to act. "I said step back." Tom barked, his voice rising above the faint hum of the drone. He pointed a finger at Anna, who stood defiantly in front of Trevor. "I've had enough of your nonsense. You and your little science experiment are interfering with an officer of the law, and I'm not going to stand here and take it." Anna met his gaze, her expression calm but firm. The physical pain from the taser was still lingering, a dull ache in her chest, but her resolve hadn't wavered. She had seen men like Tom before, men who equated power with intimidation, who used their positions as weapons rather than tools for justice. She wasn't about to let him win. Not tonight. Not in front of her son. "We're not going anywhere, officer," Anna said, her voice steady. And neither are you. You've already crossed the line multiple times. Whatever authority you think you have left is gone. Tom's jaw tightened as he glanced around the park. The small group of onlookers had grown, their murmurs creating an undercurrent of tension that he couldn't ignore. The ranger, clearly out of his depth, shifted uncomfortably but didn't intervene. The drone, still hovering, emitted a soft beep, as if reminding everyone of its presence. Trevor, clutching his tablet tightly, watched the officer's every move, ready to activate another protocol if needed. The air was thick with anticipation. Tom couldn't take it anymore. He drew his firearm in one swift motion, aiming it directly at the drone. Gasps rippled through the small crowd, and Trevor's eyes widened in fear. Anna instinctively stepped in front of her son, raising her hands. "What the hell are you doing?" Anna demanded, her voice sharp. "You're going to fire a weapon in a public park. Are you out of your mind?" Tom's grip on the gun tightened as he glared at her. "That thing is a threat," he snapped. "And if you think I'm just going to stand here and let it make a fool out of me, you're sorely mistaken." Trevor's fingers moved quickly on the tablet, his mind racing. He knew the drone wouldn't survive a direct hit, and with it would go all the evidence they had gathered. But he also knew the drone's AI had a defensive mode he hadn't fully tested yet. It was risky, but there wasn't time to hesitate. He activated the protocol. The drone emitted a sharp, high-pitched tone that made everyone wince, including Tom. It darted upward, out of his line of fire, and then began to circle him at high speed. Its lights flickered erratically, creating a disorienting strobe effect. Tom staggered, his aim faltering as he tried to track the drone's movements. The crowd murmured louder, some people taking out their phones to record the bizarre spectacle. "Turn it off," Tom shouted, his voice strained. He fired a shot, but the drone was too fast, dodging the bullet with an agility that seemed almost human. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the park, sending a wave of panic through the onlookers. Parents pulled their children close, and the ranger stepped forward, his face pale. "Officer Rains, that's enough," the ranger yelled, his voice cracking with urgency. "You're endangering civilians. Put the gun down." Tom ignored him, his focus entirely on the drone. He fired again and again, each shot missing its target. Trevor's fingers flew across the tablet, guiding the drone's evasive maneuvers while activating its next protocol. A small, compressed air burst shot out from one of the drone's nozzles, hitting Tom squarely in the chest and causing him to stumble backward. The gun slipped from his hand and clattered to the ground. Anna seized the moment. She stepped forward and kicked the gun away, sending it skidding across the pavement out of Tom's reach. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her composure. "It's over, officer," she said, her voice low and commanding. "You've lost. Stand down before you make this any worse." Tom scrambled to his feet, his face red with rage. "You think this is over?" he spat. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I'm not going to let some know it all, and her brat make a fool out of me." Trevor's hands shook as he activated the drone's final protocol, a containment mode he had designed for emergencies. The drone descended rapidly, positioning itself between Tom and Anna, its lights flashing in a steady, rhythmic pattern. A calm, robotic voice emanated from the drone's speaker, warning aggressive behavior detected. "Stand down or additional measures will be taken." The message sent a ripple of shock through the crowd. Even Anna was momentarily taken aback. She hadn't realized Trevor had programmed such a feature. Tom, however, only seemed further enraged. He lunged toward the drone, his hands outstretched as if to grab it, but the device darted backward, just out of reach. Another burst of compressed air hit him in the face, forcing him to stumble once more. "You think this stupid machine scares me?" Tom shouted, his voice hoarse. "It's just a toy. It can't stop me." Anna stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. "It doesn't need to stop you, officer. You've already stopped yourself. Every move you've made tonight has shown exactly who you are, a man who abuses his power because he can't handle being challenged. You're not a protector, you're a bully, and everyone here can see it." Tom looked around, his chest heaving. The crowd was silent now, their eyes fixed on him with a mixture of fear and disdain. The ranger, who had been standing frozen, finally stepped forward and placed a hand on Tom's shoulder. "That's enough, Rains," he said firmly. "You've done enough damage. Step down, or I'll be forced to call this in myself." For a moment it looked as though Tom might comply. His shoulders sagged slightly, and the fire in his eyes dimmed. But then he shook off the ranger's hand and turned back to Anna, his face twisted with fury. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You think you've won? You think your little gadgets are going to protect you from the consequences? I'll make sure you pay for this. Both of you." Trevor stepped forward, his small frame trembling but his voice clear. "We're not afraid of you," he said, holding the tablet like a shield. "You can't hurt us anymore. The drone recorded everything. Everyone here saw what you did. You can't get away with it." Tom opened his mouth to retort, but the words didn't come. The weight of the situation finally seemed to crash down on him. His gun was gone, his radio was useless, and his backup wasn't coming. The crowd had turned against him, their silent judgment cutting deeper than any words could. He stood there, breathing heavily, his fists clenched at his sides, as the drone hovered above him, its lights casting an almost eerie glow. Anna placed a hand on Trevor's shoulder, her voice soft but resolute. "You've already lost, officer. It's time for you to leave." Tom stared at her for a long moment, his face a mask of barely contained rage. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed off into the darkness, his steps heavy and uneven. The crowd began to disperse, their murmurs fading into the night. The ranger watched him go, his expression unreadable, before turning back to Anna and Trevor. "Are you two okay?" he asked cautiously. Anna nodded, her body still aching but her spirit unbroken. "We'll be fine," she said. "Thank you for stepping in." Trevor lowered the tablet, his hands still trembling. "Mom, do you think he's really gone?" he asked softly. Anna looked down at him, her heart swelling with pride and protectiveness. "He's gone for now," she said. "And whatever happens next, we'll face it together." The drone descended slowly, landing gently on the ground, its lights dimming. The battle was over, but the fight for justice had only just begun. As the dust began to settle, the park seemed eerily quiet after the chaos that had unfolded. The hum of Trevor's drone had stopped, its rotors still for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Anna stood tall, though her body still ached from the after-effects of the taser. Her arm rested protectively on Trevor's shoulder, both a gesture of comfort and reassurance for her son, who was still clutching the tablet tightly to his chest. Around them, the small crowd of onlookers lingered, uncertain whether to leave or wait to see what would happen next. The park ranger, visibly shaken, stepped forward, his flashlight swinging in his hand as he surveyed the scene. "Ma'am," the ranger began hesitantly, his voice low and measured. "I don't know exactly what just happened here, but I think it's safe to say that officer, he crossed a line." Anna turned her gaze toward the ranger, her eyes still sharp and filled with a quiet fury. "He didn't just cross a line," she said evenly, her voice steady but heavy with conviction. "He attacked an unarmed woman and a child. He abused his authority, fired a weapon in a public park, and tried to destroy evidence of his actions. What he did tonight wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. The ranger nodded slowly, as if processing her words. He seemed to realize that the situation had spiraled far beyond his ability to mediate. "I'll have to report this," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "But I need to ask, you said the drone recorded everything. Do you have proof of what he did?" Trevor, still holding the tablet like a lifeline, looked up at his mother for guidance. Anna gave him a small nod, and Trevor took a shaky breath before tapping a few commands on the screen. The drone, though damaged, had managed to store a complete audio and video log of the confrontation. The footage was raw and unfiltered, Tom firing his taser at Anna, shouting threats, drawing his gun, and firing wildly at the drone. Every moment of his rage and abuse was captured in sharp detail. Trevor turned the tablet toward the ranger, his hands trembling slightly as he handed it over. "It's all here," he said quietly. Everything he did. The ranger took the tablet with care, his brow furrowed as he began to review the footage. His expression darkened as he watched, his lips pressing into a tight line. "This is damning," he muttered under his breath. He looked back up at Anna and Trevor, his tone more serious now. "I'll make sure this gets into the right hands. But you should know this isn't going to be easy. Officers like him, they don't go down without a fight." Anna's jaw tightened. She knew the ranger was right. Men like Tom Raines didn't back down, they doubled down. She had no illusions that tonight's confrontation would be the end of it. If anything, it was just the beginning. But as she looked at Trevor, standing beside her with a mix of fear and determination in his young eyes, she knew she couldn't let this go unanswered. Not for herself. Not for him. "I understand," Anna said firmly. "But I won't let him get away with this. Not this time." The ranger nodded again, his respect for Anna evident in his cautious demeanor. "I'll file my report and include everything you've shared. But I suggest you prepare yourself. He's going to push back, and he'll use every resource he has to try and discredit you." Anna's lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. Let him try. As the ranger walked off, carrying the tablet with the footage, the crowd finally began to disperse. Some people murmured words of support, while others simply nodded in quiet acknowledgement of what they had witnessed. Trevor watched them go, his hands finally relaxing as he let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Mom," he said softly, his voice trembling slightly. What if he comes back? What if he tries to hurt us again?" Anna knelt down to his level, placing both hands on his shoulders. "Trevor," she said gently, her voice steady but full of emotion, "what happened tonight was terrifying, and I won't lie to you, it's not over. But what you did was brave. You stood up for yourself, for me, and for what's right. That kind of courage, it's stronger than anything someone like him can throw at us." Trevor nodded slowly, his fear giving way to a glimmer of pride. "I just didn't want him to hurt you again," he admitted. "I didn't know what else to do." "You did exactly what you needed to do," Anna said with a small smile. "And because of you, we have the proof to make sure he's held accountable." Just as she finished speaking, a set of flashing blue and red lights appeared in the distance, cutting through the dim night. A second police car pulled into the park's lot, its engine rumbling as two officers stepped out. These weren't like Tom Raines, though. Their posture was cautious, their expressions neutral but alert as they approached Anna and Trevor. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, his voice calm and professional, "we received a report of an incident involving one of our officers. Can you tell us what happened?" Anna straightened, her hands instinctively reaching for Trevor's shoulders again. She recounted the events with precision, her tone unwavering as she described Tom's unprovoked aggression, his use of the taser, his reckless gunfire, and his attempts to intimidate both her and her son. The officers listened intently, their expressions growing more serious with each passing moment. When she finished, one of them nodded grimly. "We've already had complaints filed against Officer Rains in the past," he admitted reluctantly. "If what you're saying is true, and if the footage backs it up, this might finally be enough to take action." "It's true," Anna said firmly, "and the footage will prove it." The second officer stepped forward, his gaze shifting between Anna and Trevor. "You and your son should probably head home for the night. We'll be in touch about the next steps. But if you feel unsafe or if he contacts you again, don't hesitate to call us immediately." Anna nodded, though a part of her doubted that the department would handle this as thoroughly as they claimed. Still, she had the evidence, and she knew how to fight back if they didn't. As the officers walked back toward their car, Anna turned to Trevor, placing a hand on his back as they began to gather their things. The drone, battered but still functional, sat on the ground where it had landed. Trevor picked it up carefully, cradling it like a wounded animal. "Do you think we can fix it?" he asked, his voice small but hopeful. Anna smiled, ruffling his hair gently. "Of course we can," she said. "We've fixed tougher problems before, haven't we?" Trevor nodded, a small smile creeping onto his face. Despite the fear and chaos of the night, he felt a sense of relief knowing his mum believed in him. Together they packed up their equipment and walked back to their car, the events of the evening still weighing heavily on them, but unable to break their spirit. As they drove home, the quiet hum of the engine filled the space between them. Trevor stared out the window, his mind racing with thoughts of what might happen next. Anna glanced at him in the rearview mirror, her heart aching for her son. She knew tonight had changed him, forced him to confront a world that wasn't always fair or kind. But she also knew that he had risen to the challenge, proving that even in the face of fear he had the strength to fight back. Whatever came next, be it investigations, court battles, or more confrontations, Anna was ready. She would protect her son, hold Tom Rains accountable, and show Trevor that standing up for what's right was always worth it, no matter the cost. In the days following the incident at the park, the weight of what had happened settled heavily on Anna and Trevor. The video footage captured by the drone had been handed over to authorities, and word of Officer Tom Rains' actions spread quickly through official channels. At first, there was a tense silence, as though everyone involved was bracing for the inevitable fallout. Anna knew how these situations often played out. Investigations would stall, excuses would be made, and justice would be delayed. But this time she was determined not to let it end like that. Anna wasted no time. The day after the incident, she contacted a civil rights attorney, an old colleague who had long been an advocate for holding law enforcement accountable. Together they reviewed the footage, preparing a formal complaint against Rains and the department that had allowed his behavior to persist unchecked. The footage was damning. It showed every detail of Rains' escalating aggression, from the moment he fired his taser at Anna to his reckless use of his firearm and his threats toward Trevor. It also captured Anna's composed defiance and Trevor's ingenuity, painting a stark contrast between the abuse of power and their courageous resistance. Trevor, for his part, remained quieter than usual in the days following the ordeal. At first, Anna worried that the incident had shaken his confidence, that the sight of a trusted authority figure turning violent had left scars deeper than she could see. But as the week went on, she began to notice a change in him, a quiet determination that mirrored her own. He spent hours in his room, tinkering with the damaged drone, refusing to give up on repairing it. When Anna asked if he wanted help, he would smile faintly and say, "I've got this, Mom. You've got enough to handle." The community began to take notice of the situation. News of the confrontation had spread, thanks to the witnesses in the park who had shared what they'd seen with friends and family. People were outraged not just by Raines's actions, but by the idea that something like this could happen to anyone anywhere. Parents approached Anna at Trevor's school, expressing their support and sharing their own fears about encounters with authority figures who abused their power. Anna listened, comforted them, and made it clear that she wasn't backing down. One evening, as Anna sat in the kitchen reviewing notes for the case with her attorney, Trevor walked in, carrying the drone. It was battered and still showed signs of its ordeal, but it was operational again. Its lights blinked softly, and its rotors hummed faintly as Trevor placed it gently on the counter. "It's ready," he said simply, his voice steady. Anna looked up, pride swelling in her chest. "You did it," she said, standing to examine the drone more closely. "It looks as good as new." Trevor nodded, but his expression was serious. "I want to make it even better," he said. "Stronger, safer, so nothing like that can ever happen again." Anna's throat tightened as she placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've already done so much, Trevor. That drone helped us stand up to someone who tried to hurt us. You should be proud of what you created." Trevor met her gaze, his eyes filled with a quiet resolve far beyond his years. "I am proud, Mum, but I want to make sure it can protect more people, not just us." Anna didn't need to ask what he meant. She saw the same fire in his eyes that she felt in her own heart, a determination to turn their experience into something meaningful, something that could create change. "Then, let's do it together," she said softly. "We'll make it better, stronger, and we'll make sure people know what you've done." The following weeks were a blur of activity. The investigation into Raines gained momentum as more witnesses came forward to corroborate Anna and Trevor's account of what had happened. The footage from the drone was undeniable, leaving Raines with little room to defend himself. He was suspended from duty, pending the outcome of the investigation, but Anna and her attorney pushed for more. They demanded not just accountability for Raines, but systemic reforms to prevent officers like him from abusing their power again. As the case gained traction, Anna and Trevor were invited to speak at a local community event focused on police accountability and public safety. It was Trevor's first time speaking in front of such a large crowd, but he stood beside his mother, his tablet in hand, and told their story with remarkable composure. He demonstrated the drone's capabilities, explaining how it had been designed to help people, not to harm them. The audience listened intently, their expressions a mix of admiration and outrage. After the event, several people approached Anna and Trevor, offering their support and asking how they could help. Local tech enthusiasts even volunteered to work with Trevor on improving his drone, turning his project into a collaborative effort that drew attention from engineers and scientists across the region. What had started as a school project was quickly becoming a symbol of resistance and ingenuity in the face of injustice. One evening, as Anna and Trevor were working together in their home lab, a notification popped up on her phone. It was an update from her attorney. Raines had been formally charged with multiple counts of misconduct, including excessive use of force and reckless endangerment. The charges were the result of not just their evidence, but the collective pressure from the community and the unwavering determination of Anna and Trevor. Anna read the message aloud, and Trevor's face lit up with a rare smile. "Does this mean it's over?" he asked, his voice tinged with hope. Anna shook her head, her smile bittersweet. "It's a step in the right direction," she said, "but it's not over. Not until we make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Trevor nodded, his hands returning to the drone's controls. "Then we keep going," he said simply. As the months passed, the ripple effects of their actions continued to grow. The case against Drains sparked a larger conversation about police accountability in the community, leading to new policies aimed at preventing abuse of power. Trevor's improved drone design gained recognition from both local and national organizations, earning him invitations to showcase his work at technology conferences. At one such event, Anna watched from the audience as Trevor stood on stage, explaining how his drone had been born out of necessity and how it had helped him and his mum stand up to injustice. She felt a surge of pride as the crowd erupted into applause, not just for the technology but for the young boy who had turned fear into strength. In the end, the confrontation at the park became more than just a traumatic memory. It became a turning point, a moment that pushed Anna and Trevor to stand up, speak out, and create change. It wasn't the life Anna had imagined for her son, but as she watched him grow into a confident, compassionate young man, she knew it was a path worth walking. One quiet evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the stars, Trevor turned to Anna and said, "Mom, do you think we made a difference?" Anna smiled, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "We did, Trevor, and we'll keep making a difference. Together." The drone, sitting beside them, blinked softly in the darkness, a small but powerful reminder of how far they'd come and how much farther they could go.